Okay, first things first. This is this is like a cooking show, so this is where we're going today. But we're going to put this away. I want you guys to take your watercolor paper. You want to look at both sides, right? You want the side that's textury, so you can feel it or you can see it. Okay, and then you want to take your little 4 by 5.5 card. Okay, and you want to cut a little square, or not cut, draw a little square. In 4 sections. There's my pencil. And give yourself space around. It doesn't have to be super perfect. But give yourself 4 sections because we're doing 4 different types of sky. Don't lose these rectangles. I'll use them again. So when you're done, don't toss it out. Just give it to me. Or at the end of class. That's fine too. So the first thing that we're going to do is mix our paint. So you can take your kind of medium wide brush. Okay. And you want a blue. And I'm going to say we're going to go with a kind of, I don't know, fairly intense sky blue, we'll say. So get a little bit of water. And I think I'm going to use like this blue right here off to the side. And I'm going to kind of work that surface and bring it over to my palette. See, I'm creating like a little well on my palette. That's why you need a clean palette. You want to have enough blue that you can work with. And I like this particular blue. I think I'm going to just use that. Maybe a tiny bit of this blue right here. It's kind of a slight indigo. And you can see how much I have puddled there. I want to leave it. And then I'm just going to rest my brush across my water container. I'm going to take my wide brush, my super wide brush. It's clean, there's nothing on it. I'm going to get it wet. And I'm going to just wet this first upper left-hand corner side. If you have like something on the paper, you can try to get it off. And you want to soak it, but not like dripping. You don't want puddles. You want it saturated without puddles. All the way across. This is wet on wet. And sometimes in this light, it's really hard to see, like, do I have puddles? Do I not have puddles? And so you might have to angle yourself just a little bit. We're going to give it just maybe 30 seconds to soak in. While we're waiting for it to soak in, we're going to take a little piece of paper towel, just a little piece, crumple it up, have it on the ready. Okay. And I think I'm good. I have a little puddle right here, so I'm going to dab where I have a tiny bit of puddle. I just don't want sitting water on my paper. And then I'm going to take my brush with my blue, my wide brush. Okay, I'm going to start at the top. I want the tone and color on the top to be intense. Notice it starts to bleed. That's okay. So we're going to say about the top third, or maybe half. We're going to keep it kind of an intense blue, and you can layer it a couple of times. If you feel like you're getting some puddles, you can dab them a tiny bit. There's a texture to the paper. You will see the texture. That's okay. And then you're going to take a little bit of water to this, rinse out your brush just a tiny bit, and then you'll have just a little water so that the bottom half starts to become a little bit lighter. And then you can kind of even it out as best you can. Like I want a little more right through here, so I'm going to add a little paint. I don't want it to look stripy. Kind of even. So dark to light on the bottom. Okay. Then you're going to take your paper towel, soaked in, I don't have puddles, I'm good. And along kind of the top third, I'm going to make my larger clouds by lifting up the paint. This is a great trick. And you don't want them to be even little puffs, because clouds are not that perfect, right? So we want it to be, you know, to go across, to meander a little bit, have thins and thicks, you know. And you really do want to lift up the paint a bit. I like that. That's good. I'm going to come back and kind of get a little more white in there in some areas. A little right there, a little wispy on the top there. That looks good. And then I'm going to do the same thing underneath in a few layers, but they're going to start to get a little smaller. And again, they don't have to be perfectly even. Like that's a little too linear, so I'm going to bunch this up and fix that. So you can kind of see them moving along in the horizon. You want to move your paper towel in different directions so that it doesn't look like a pattern stamp. Okay, and then maybe a third and fourth layer towards as you get thinner, towards the bottom. I'm going to do a third layer with the paper towel, very, very thin and narrow. And then I might do a little bit with a dry brush. Have it travel right off the page. Everyone's is going to look a little different, as it should. Like that. And then the last trick, I might do a tiny line with this. Just a little bit with the paper towel. And then I'm going to take a dry brush and just kind of give myself along the lower part just a little wispiness. And, you know, you can wipe off the dry brush on a paper towel in the back of your hand. But, like, just give it a little back and forth lines. And it'll lift up some of the paint. and push it around a little. It'll soften the edges just a bit. You guys are going to be expert plein air painters by the time you're done. But notice I'm not really overworking this. I'm just kind of manipulating it a little. Next step is to mix a yellow, a warm yellow. So I'm going to have you, like, in the palette there should be kind of a light orange, dark yellow. That going. Give yourself another little well. And I would add, you can add a tiny bit of red to this if you want. Give yourself plenty of yellow paint. And I should say, this one right here, we're going to go back into and create shadows on the bottom sides of those clouds. But we have to wait at least 30 minutes in order to do that. Okay, so we won't get to that today in class. We'll get to it next class. But you can't touch that after you've finished your dabbing and you've got it just the way you want it. Just leave it, okay? And we'll go on to the next one. So again, you are going to blend, or not blend, but wet that surface. I've got a little bleed over with the blue, but I'll be careful. And again, these are just samples. So you want to get the surface saturated, but you don't want it like soaking wet. And again, you could look to the side, like I have a puddle right here. Just so you can see the, the glare of the puddle. And then take your yellow. And we're doing a similar thing where we start with the intensity on the top and working our way down to a lighter sky. I'm going to have a little green here because I have a little blend, but that's okay. So again, this is a wet to wet technique. Okay, and then when I want a little bit more of a watery surface, I just add a little water to my brush, bring it down, and then that one we're going to leave because again we need to give it another 30 minutes to add our clouds to this one because we're going to do it in a different technique, a light to dark. We're going to add like a purple cloud. But we're going to just leave it for right now to dry. With this one, I want you guys to take one small roundish section and leave it blank. Don't put any paint on it. So how you're going to do that is you're going to kind of wet the surface and leave a little area that doesn't have any water on it. Now, we have this really rectangular brush, so you can start rectangular, but then maybe take a clean round brush and make that, instead of a little square, kind of a roundish surface. And again, saturate it.
Is that going to be the sun?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be like light coming through the kind of clouds.
So how big should it be?
Well, everyone's going to be a little different. So I'm making mine, like an inch-ish. But everyone's will be a little bit different. So I'm taking one of my brushes trying to clean it off. And just making it wet, but like, just making so it's not a rectangle. And then, again, I'm going to use this yellow. And you can use a couple of brushes on this. What I would do is start with your larger brush just to get the paint on there. Work it around. Okay. And we're not doing it as linear as we did the first two. Kind of working the surface a little bit differently. And we're going to add a few tones in there to make it visually interesting. So we're starting, yellow is our base. And again, the surface is wet. And we want, again, we're going wet to wet. Now we're not just wet on a wet surface, but wet paint to wet paint. And I'm going to use a larger roundish brush, one that looks like this. And I'm going to use that for a little bit of this yellow, but then I'm going to add a tiny bit of red. And I might do a little blue in this one. So it'll be a reddish yellow, orangey, but enough of red that you can kind of see that red. And I'm just going to blend it in. And you guys can do it in any pattern because it's your sky, not my sky. It's kind of supposed to be light going through a stormy kind of looking cloud. That's what it's supposed to be. Now you notice right here that I have, it's more of a hard line because that's my dry area. So a way to soften that is to take another brush, make sure it's clean and it has just water on it. And you can take that surface and you can just wet that edge just a little to give it a softer edge so that you don't have a hard edge. You don't want a hard edge on any of this right now. See how I just did that? Then I'm going to go back and work that red a little in some other areas. The key is not to have your brush stroke showing. And you can, like, you know, if you want to try a little blue, you have blue on there. Just a tiny bit maybe. Bring it in. And if I did the blue, I'm going to do it closer to the red because then it becomes more of a purple as opposed to a green. And if it feels like, oh gosh, that was a little strong, that was a little much, I can come back and just work that a little, soften it. You can also take your paper towel if you feel like, oh, I did it a little too much. Take your paper towel and give it a dab. Key is not to overwork it. So once you get to a certain point, you're like, okay, that looks good. Looks sky-like. Tiny bit of purple up here, I think. That's it. We don't want to overwork it. Last one, let's go ahead and wet this surface. Make sure it's saturated, but not drippy. And then I'm going to have you guys mix a brighter yellow.
What colors are you mixing?
A brighter yellow. So I'm going to bring it over here so you guys can see it. But this is what I'm mixing. And then I'm just going to take a little water to this and make sure that there's an area that's kind of wet through it that I'm going to work my kind of summery clouds, night sky clouds, dusk clouds. So I'm going to, because I want them to kind of bleed a little, I'm going to go on a slight angle. And bring them down through here with my brighter yellow. And you could do, you know, one or two kind of angled areas. I'm doing one right here on this one. But notice how I have it bleeding to give you that soft look on the top. And it's not even. And if you're not getting enough bleed, add a little bit more water on the top. See how I'm adding just a tiny bit of like a wash on the top, and that takes that hard line out of it and softens it. Alright, once you're done with that, I need you guys, if you would, please hold off your conversations. I am recording, so if I have a lot of background noise, it's hard for me to make sure that we're hearing everything we need to. Okay? So the last color, we're going to rinse out a brush, and we're going to create a purple. So you can use a little of this blue that you already have mixed. Add a tiny bit of red, maybe a little more red, and create kind of a bruisey purple. You could add a little yellow if you want to gray it. Because if you think about a color wheel, purple and yellow are across from each other. When you mix them, they create a chromatic gray. So if you want to tone down a color, you want to add the opposite color to it. All right, once we have that, and it's still a little bit wet, I'm going to take one of my brushes, get a little water, and run it along the bottom side of my yellow stripe here. Not really a stripe, but kind of a loose linear line. And then I'm going to add that purple so that it blends. Okay? This is your last step. Don't overwork it. See how that kind of blends a little? And that's it. We're going to add a little water to the bottom if it's dried out. just so it blends nicely. But again, not overworking it. Get the purple, add it into the bottom. You may get these lovely wisps in this direction, which is great. Go with that. Don't overwork it. You guys can see what mine looks like. And then leave it. Trust yourself that you are making a magnificent cloud. We have 8 minutes. Your last step, once you're done with that,